Coronavirus continues to impact the channel, and BeckTek CEO Scott Beck joins us to discuss, as well as e-cycling for charity and news from D&H, Tech Data, and Zix, plus a special guest interview with Dan Schiappa, Chief Product Officer at Sophos. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 142, E-Cycling with a Burly Coach. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ChannelPro Weekly, episode 142. My name is Matt Whitlock, Technology Editor, Online Director, and your host of this fine program for you. And who do I say you are? Well, you should know who you are, but if you don't know who you are, you're a VAR, you're an integrator, you're an MSP, you're an IT reseller, you're an IT consultant, you're an MSSSSP, if your job title has a whole bunch of acronyms in it, you're probably in the right spot. And if none of that sounded like you, like if you are into baking, you're probably not in the right place. But we'd love to have you anyway, because what the heck, we like to have a lot of fun here. So thanks for being here for that. While I am the captain of this cruise, the James T. Kirk, if you will, my Scotty, the guy who actually makes the ship run and makes everything actually happen, is also here. Rich Friedman, everyone.
Greetings, everybody. And you know what, Matt, listening to that intro, and we've done it, this is episode 142 to here. We've done this a long time, but all of a sudden now, I've got acronym envy. I don't have one. You know what I mean? Neither do you. We got to work on this.
Yeah, we need to work on that. Mine could be a pretty good one too, because it's like TE and then OD. So TEOD. That's pretty good. TEOD. What was it? Yours would be executive. Your EE. We need like a consonant in there, like executive editor and all around good guy. So like EEAGG.
Or executive editor and podcast host, so EEF.
And then we can still put the all good guy in there, so EEALF. Yeah, we got to work on that. We need more acronyms in our life, that's for sure. I do have a first mate, my own. Who was the first mate on the original classic Star Trek, Rich? Who was that? That was it Spock? No, he was the science engineer.
Science officer, but close enough, yeah. I don't.
So I'm ashamed. I know my next gen much better than my original crew, apparently. So my commander Spock for this episode, our guest host. We're so glad he's here. He's the CEO of BeckTek, Scott Beck. Everyone.
Hi, thanks for having me. And I was listening to all those acronyms and went, "Hey, we are on an IT podcast."
We sure are, aren't we? So there's lots of those out there, and so you have CEO. That's your acronym. So at least you got that down. So Scott, for those who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about BeckTek.
Sure. Well, the high-level view is I'm actually an old radio guy that got replaced by computers back in the early 90s. I know what you're thinking. Looking pretty good for an old fella. But when computers started rolling in, I went, hey, I better start learning this computer stuff if I'm going to stay viable in radio and keep my job. Well, it didn't take long before I figured out that there was more money in computers than there was in radio. And the progression of my career started to change. And I ended up opening up BeckTek 16 years ago now as a break-fix shop, as a lot of folks are, taking on all customers to try to turn a buck, and have evolved now into a 5-person outfit. We are a managed service provider that's very security-centric. I like to say a security-centric MSP. That's pretty much us in a nutshell. And it's been a blessed ride, and I get to hang out with guys like you. It's awesome.
I love to hear that, and we love hanging out with guys like you as well. So it sounds like your business has a very similar story to a lot of modern-day MSPs out there. You started out in break-fix, and you kind of grew into managed services, and now you're looking at a security angle in managed services, because obviously that's a very dominant area of interest right now.
And whether you would say it was a blessing or whatnot, but about 7 years ago, I mean, I had what people refer to as a comfort business. It was making me a living, life was good, but it was a lifestyle business. It was supporting my lifestyle. But as many people that I've met in the industry, once you get to working 18-hour days, it's hard to trade more time for money. There's no more time left. So I ended up joining a peer group. And in that peer group, one of the clients got hit by CryptoLocker, one of the first ransomware attacks. So we're talking, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And because of that event, started moving towards security. So I've kind of been on this path a while now when this thing happened. So so I always say it was kind of a blessing that it occurred, but it didn't happen to my client. So I guess it was a real blessing.
Yeah.
So Scott, what were you doing in radio that computers were threatening, out of curiosity?
I was actually an on-air radio announcer, on-air talent, but they brought in, I'm going to show you how old I am. 1992, they brought in what was called a live assist computer system. So for the techies in the crowd, you might enjoy this. We had like a 20 Denon stacked CD players in the back corner of the room. They brought in a modern computer system, which had like 16 megs of RAM, a 486 gig hard drive. I mean, it was tiny, tiny, tiny. And that became the radio station. So when they first brought this in, it was, hey, Scott, go in, you're going to do your show, unpause, pause the computer, and do your normal talking. And it was, hey, Scott, go into the radio station, sit in the newsroom, play Nintendo, and record your voice into the computer. And the computer's going to play everything. Then it was, okay, Scott, that seems to be working okay. You go home, and now think about this. This is back in 1992, but the computer system, they had a speaker in the engineering room. If the decibel levels fell too low, the computer system would start calling employees to tell us that the station was off the air, which was pretty advanced for 1992. So then we did that. And then Sunday I realized, hey, they're paying me a 40-hour work week, and I'm now working 6 hours or 5 hours during the week, because you could go in and voice track a full 6-hour on-air radio show in an hour. I'm like, yeah, okay, this computer stuff's going to become very important to know, and that's where the transition started. But yeah, I was an on-air announcer.
That's awesome. And what was the kind of the stint of your on-air announcing? What were you announcing?
Oh, I was in radio music format. So most of my career, I was doing adult contemporary, which is nice, mellow music. But I worked in a country station, a rock station. And I ended up being a reporter, doing a stint in the newsroom, and doing a stint in copywriting. All the things you get to play with in a radio station.
That's like super. I could talk to you for hours about that. It's very, very, very interesting. So tell us also a little bit about you personally. Hobbies. What do you like to do? You got any interests that are kind of notable or interesting?
My hobby was computers, which has turned into my profession. Really, my big hobbies now is family and travel. My wife and I we started a family very early in life, and so now a little bit later on, we're starting to enjoy some rewards of some freedom and up until recently, being able to travel and go places. So now we're getting ready and getting set to be able to do some more of that. But luckily, through my profession and as my business has grown and demands of my time and my ability to go and meet with other people, it's allowing me to do a lot of travel. So I've been able to go to Australia. We've been all around the United States. For those I maybe didn't mention, I'm actually located in Canada. We're like the New England of the North here in Atlantic, Canada. So it's been great. So really the big thing is to travel, get to see the world. It's been fun.
Amazing. And you mentioned family, so I assume you have kids. How many kids?
I've got 3 kids and two grandkids. And again, I'm going to go back to, not bad for this young looking face, but yeah, I've got a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old grandsons, and they are so much fun. If I know grandkids were going to be so much fun, I would have skipped the kids and went right to that.
I'm sure you'll find a way to make that work. What do you think, Rich?
Working on it now, I'm sure. As a matter of fact, tell me a little bit more about where in Canada you are. My impression is you're in a relatively rural spot, but I'm not clear on that.
So, if for those that understand the East Coast, if you take the I-95 north, you go all the way to the Canadian border and go another 3 hours, and that's us. So I'm 9 hours north of Boston.
So it gets cold there in the winter.
Yeah, we're very, so when you think of the state of Maine and what that looks like with the lobster fishery and the nice coastlines and the trees, yeah, we're the Canadian version of that.
Very cool. Well, again, welcome, and it's so great to have you. I know we have a lot to talk about here on the show. I know we're going to start off. We're going to be talking about, your business and kind of the things that you're doing to cope with the coronavirus and how you're looking at that and things that you're doing to not only stay alive, but even thrive during these crazy, crazy times that we're all living in. We do have some news stories. So we're going to talk about a D&H story, a little bit from Tech Data. We got a story from Zix. We're going to talk about e-cycling for a particular cause. Rich, I'm very, very interested to hear about this one because I don't know what the hell e-cycling is. We did an interview on Monday with Dan Schiappa from Sophos. So later on the show, we're going to cut over that and give that a listen. And of course, we're going to have fun with Scott Beck throughout the entire episode here. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Scott, why don't I kick off the questioning here by asking you, what is your take on the current environment and how is it starting to affect your business?
So my take from my media background that we just kind of talked about was I felt early on that the media was cherry picking information and kind of overblowing and creating a lot of extra panic. It's a very serious situation. I'm not saying it's not, but use some common sense and some safety that's being recommended by the CDC and elsewhere. And what I've been trying to tell my clients and family and friends is the media's number one job is sales. How do they get sales is by having viewership. How do you get viewership? By being sensational. Back in my radio days, the saying was, if it bleeds, it leads. So unfortunately, that's what's happening. So you asked me about media, that's what I feel is happening there. From a business point of view, I've been blessed that our client base, we've got several that have been deemed essential and professional services, and they're still operating. A few of the smaller companies are struggling. We're seeing a bit of that in the marketplace. But overall, as far as BeckTek and our clients go, things have been good, and actually we're a little busier than we used to be. You know, I like every other IT provider with clients uplifting that many people to work remotely from home, and then training the people how to work from home was interesting. Let's go with interesting for a couple of weeks there.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, what were the immediate challenges that you ran into, and what kind of solutions did you come up with? I mean, there might be some lessons learned, some insights, some best practices that could be useful to folks in the audience.
Well, sure. Well, we've always had two different work from home type scenarios, depending on how people were set up, whether it was through a virtual private network with corporate owned devices going back to the office, and using our remote management tool, we were able to get people connected through our tool back to their desktops. So we've always had that. And I've always had disaster recovery plans for all my clients. I just had never envisioned a time that I have to activate all those plans at once. So, you know, we call them provinces instead of states, but in my province, you know, on Tuesday, they declared a state of emergency. On Wednesday, my team received several hundred requests to suddenly work from home. And can we get that done by noon, you know, as a lot of people would have. And now clients were great. We were able to work through that. It just made for a lot of business. So with some forward thinking and having had these solutions in place, Rich, it made it easier to do. And I would say the big takeaway that we really learned was to make sure to set expectations and over communicate with clients so they knew what to expect. So they didn't feel like they were being left out, like, okay, they've been sent home, but they're still being expected to do their jobs. So letting them know someone had their back and we're going to get taken care of and shown to them and give them some compassion. As I told my guys, during this event, when people are calling, they're going to be overly extra panicked. We can't take that personally, and we actually have to be that calming voice of reason and to help lower blood pressures. I see that as our job. Yes, we've got to do IT. Yes, we've got to keep things running, and we've got to make sure that they can be as productive as possible. But in this world of craziness, let's also be that voice of I don't want to say sanity, but that voice of reason to just slow things down and make things calm, make people feel safe. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from my clients around that and appreciations for that. And it's actually ended up leading to, we were talking offline this week alone. I did up a bunch of resources to give to my clients, you know, how to work safe from home, how to avoid coronavirus scams, 6 best practices for running your business for business owners who were feeling panicked. So I created this webpage and I sent it out to my clients. organically, they started sharing it to their friends, and I started getting more requests for that. So I made it available publicly. So if you go to the BeckTek.ca, there's a spot there, you click it, you go to the link, all the resources are there. From that, it led to a lot of media interest. So I've been doing a lot of newspaper interviews, been doing radio interviews. Yesterday was a TV interview, and I was mentioning just before we sat down to start this, I just got another TV request to go chat around this too. So I've been trying to make sure that we are positioned and ready to go. You know, business may have slowed down, meaning new business potentially may have slowed down. It's kind of hard to talk to new prospects during this time frame. You know, you call them at the office. Can you get? You probably can. I've heard some people are having better luck calling people right now because people are around and open to it. But it's harder to mail to. So my focus has been how to be positioned and ready to go once we're open for business again fully, and not to be sitting around idling and thinking negative thoughts. Let's be positive. We know we're going to come out of this on the other side, and how do we help our existing clients, and how do we get set to help others? They're going to need it on the other side, because guys, I hate to say it, let's face it, when we come through this, not all IT service providers are going to come out the other side of this, and that's just the sad reality. So.
Yeah, and I want to kind of circle back to that and just get your thoughts on what comes next. Nobody really knows what comes next, but it's important to be sort of thinking ahead to opportunities and the market landscape we're likely to be in later on. But I just want to call attention to a couple of things you said in there that I've heard from other people I respect in the industry. And one of them, you were talking about over communicating with customers, and that keeps coming up in the conversations I have with MSPs, that you really can't, in a sense, over communicate with your customers. Like if you're afraid you're going to be a pain in the neck and you're calling them too often, it's almost impossible to do that. They really want as much communication from their IT provider as they can get. And the other thing that you said that really resonated was I did an article about a company, an IT company in Illinois called MNJ Technologies. And they too, the executive there I was talking with as well, said that our primary responsibility is taking care of the technology needs of our customers, but I'm really emphasizing with our salespeople and with our technicians that, you need to be asking people about how they're doing personally. You need to be, you're this kind of, you have a psychological influence on your customers in a sense, in a crisis like this. So you do want to kind of help calm them down, help them feel confident about the technology that you're using. And there's something very kind of human about that. And it's not something that, is top of mind, a day-to-day kind of best practice that a salesperson or a technician typically does. At MNJ, they really had to tell their employees, look, I want you to ask people how they're just doing personal. How are you holding up? How's your family? And be mindful of your tone and what you say, and project leadership and confidence so that they feel a sense of confidence. It's really an important thing.
Well, Rich, human nature is kind of a herd mentality. So if you and your team are spewing negativity and the world's ending and the world's falling, that's going to go across to your clients, which is not necessarily the message you want to be going across. You've got to be, as I said earlier, that voice of reason, that voice of calm, the voice of positivity, because most people are already hearing enough negative stuff elsewhere. I personally don't feel we should be feeding the negativity. We should be looking at the positive. And I love that, ask how they're doing. I mean, that's what my team has already been doing. I love the fact that, Rich, you just said others are doing it too. I think that's bang on.
So you mentioned earlier that you've made security sort of an area of specialty for the company, and there are a lot of channel pros out there right now struggling a little bit with security and keeping work from home clients safe. You've got people working on the family PC, or people who don't have access to a VPN and so on. Do you have any advice for them about the best ways to keep clients who are remoting into the office secure?
So, well, from my experience, we had 2 solutions already in place and ready to go. So if you didn't have solutions, I guess number one would be find a solution to get them secure. Having them send documents through Dropbox to a home computer to be worked on, or to let a home computer VPN into the office and it hurts my head to think what you could be opening the doorway up to. You're taking unsecured devices and letting them into the corporate network, or you're letting corporate network information, private, proprietary stuff sinking outside of it. My grandfather used to say, you can't close the barn door after the horse is out. And to me, a lot of this syncing, if you let that data out and it's not controlled and there's no way to track it, no way to recall it, it just scares the bejeebers out of me. So if you didn't have solutions available to clients and you're still struggling, reach out to some of your peers or some other vendors in the market. There are solutions out there that are not super expensive. And listen, there's been a lot of vendors stepped up in the channel that have been giving away some stuff for free just to try to help people over the hump. I think it's brilliant because it allows people to try things before they buy them, but really it gets people over the hump. And it kind of warmed my heart to see so many in the channel that were doing that it wasn't a mad dash to try to nickel and dime people. It was actually a sense of trying to help. And so if someone's struggling, Rich, I'd say that they need to reach out to some peers, get into a group, reach into the ChannelPro network, whatever the case is, and ask for help and get some guidance and get those solutions for your clients. Can you imagine if your client ended up getting ransomware because you didn't keep them secure? So on top of all that's going on, now you've got to worry about dealing with a ransomware. I mean, we're now talking, it's ransomware has always been bad, but in this environment, this could be business ending. And that's something that keeps me up at night, Rich. You're going, okay, if that was to happen to my client because I was negligent, that would be bad. And to me, negligent is not educating, not telling the story, how can a business owner make a decision about security if you haven't educated them, if you haven't talked to them about it? I've heard from many peers in the past, like, oh, they'll never spend the money on it. Maybe they won't, but if you haven't brought it to their attention and said, hey, here's the risk, here's what could happen, here's the business impact. And I like using stories and telling actual stories. I mean, so some of them are not happy stories because, we had a local business get hit for like $235,000 because they wanted to run free antivirus and had no follow-up. I mean, it was bad, but I use that story when I'm educating people. So how can they make informed business decisions about their business and what they're willing to accept as risks if we as service providers aren't bothering to tell them about it?
I mean, you built your remote work security stack a long time ago. And so for somebody in the audience right now who is kind of figuring that out on the fly, it might not be possible to duplicate that. But I mean, what does that stack look like for you? In an environment where you've got the customer set up to work remotely in a secure fashion, what kind of solutions are you using?
So I'm leveraging my remote management and monitoring platform to give them the remote connection into it. We're using, should I say name brands?
Yeah, why not?
Go ahead.
We use Kaseya for a remote managing monitoring tool. So we've got remote connections going back into the desktops. We're using, all my clients, we've had them on a security stack already. So if the question is, Rich, okay, I didn't have any of this stuff in place. Now all my people are working from home. Now what do I do? It's going to be a lot of talking to your clients and saying, we got some tough roads ahead that we got to haul because here's our risks. How are you going to update all these computers? I mean, Rich, you're giving me a headache just thinking about it. Yeah. I'm stressing out.
What do you do? The answer is pray.
When I've talked to clients in the past and I've explained this stuff, I say, if you're using hope as your business strategy, I hope nothing bad ever happens. I hope my staff will never click on anything. I hope when they go to work from home, nothing bad's going to happen. Not a good business strategy. So if you're an IT service provider and suddenly you're in the crap and you didn't have anything set up before, hoping that nothing's going to happen is probably not a great strategy. And you know, it's not going to be fun conversations to be having in this time frame, I don't imagine. But my view, you kind of have to be having them, or you may not have those clients on the other side. Remember when I said not all providers are going to make it to the other side? This is kind of the stuff that scares me a little bit, that if you're not willing to have that tough talk because you're fearful that the client's going to say, oh, I'm not going to spend any money on that, so I'm going to go find another provider. If you're fearing about the results to your business, instead of looking for the best interests of your clients, you may fall on the wrong side of this when we get to the other side.
So let's talk about the other side here. We were kind of, alluding to that before. Again, we don't know when we get there. There's a lot that happens, but anything we say here is going to be at least somewhat speculative. But as you look down the road, you sort of look ahead to where needs may be, where opportunities may be after the lockdown phase, if you will, the worst portion of this coronavirus pandemic is behind us. How do you see the industry looking different, maybe in terms of where it was before, and what do you think that'll mean for people like yourself?
I can see a lot of opportunity that's going to be coming to us. Because think on this for a second. For many, many jobs, employers said, you can't do that remotely. It's impossible. Well, now it's happening. So what does that mean? All right, well, maybe I had an office and I was paying for seating for 40 people, but suddenly I realized really my core group only needs to be 5 or 7 in the office, and I can save a lot of money and I can have people working remotely. How do I make sure that these people are being efficient? How do I track that? There's going to be, there's a software package out there for checking efficiency rates of remote workers. I see that's going to be a big boom. There's no secret if I tell you that I've been heavily looking at that industry because I can see that coming on the other side of this. Because again, they weren't able to work remotely. It's not possible. Well, now it is possible. So now when an employer says, no, Susie, you can't go home and work for that anymore. Well, yeah, you did for how many months? Oh yeah, that did actually work, and we did kind of get through that. So how am I going to deal with that as an employer in future? Well, we as the IT people, we're going to be getting those questions. So we better start figuring that out now because it's coming. That train's on the track and it's coming straight at us. So I know I've started looking at what that looks like and what solutions are there, and started testing some stuff so that I'll be able to give that advice once we get to the other side.
Scott, you talked about efficiency and, people who maybe have never worked from home, learning to work from home. And you said, but you wrote a bunch of resources and stuff to help with that. Do you have stuff in there about if you've never worked from home, here's a checklist of how do you tune out your spouse? How do you tune out your kids? How do you, as someone who's worked from home for a long time, I kind of know how to do that, but a lot of people don't. Do you have any information or insight on that?
So we used, from a security point of view, SANS Institute had put out a 5-thing checklist. So we use that kind of as a base as we were trying to help educate people. But I love how you brought that up, Matt. How you've got to dedicate a space in the office for you. That's now your office. Because you never had to worry about kids or guests or those kind of distractions. And now you do. Even with my own team working remotely, and I'm going to be honest with myself, sometimes it's hard to stay focused and engaged for a full workday because, hey, Facebook is just right there. Oh, well, that leads to YouTube, and that leads to, and when you're in the office with people around all the time, it's harder to do that. So it's much easier to get distracted, which is why I figured there's going to be a demand for some of this productivity and efficiency type software in future. But we were just trying to educate the basic things. Your work computer's for work. Do not have the kids on it. Do not be going out and purchasing personal things on it. Don't be putting your personal, you do work things on your work computer. Remote printing, having to help people with that, because most people never stop to think about that. How do we get that print job from the office back to the house? So there was a lot of that training, because for, I don't want to say most people, but for a lot of people, when they transitioned, the whole concept of, okay, being able to do what you do sitting in front of your computer, but doing it from home, okay, I like the benefits, but what are you giving up? And just having to explain it to it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that have got clients that are running Citrix or remote desktops, you know, so how do you get them into the office to what they used to be their desktop to get into something else? Or how did you transition it so that it was secure so they could connect outside? I mean, there's so many different variables of the technology, but we had to spend a lot of time hand-holding and walking people through that until they went, oh, okay, yeah, all right, this is how that works. So it just ended up fielding a lot of calls and a lot of various conversations.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing those insights. I think we're gonna move on to the news and talk about a couple of news stories that we got come up. And of course, you're more than welcome to chime in on these and share a little bit about your thoughts and insights, especially how they relate to today and how these things would affect you if you use them as you see as an MSP. So the first story we're going to talk about is one from D&H. And Rich, I think we've talked about some stories like this over the last couple of weeks, how distributors and hardware manufacturers and stuff are kind of working with finance terms and kind of loosening things a little bit to kind of help MSPs and integrators with some cash problems that they might be having. So Rich, tell us what D&H is doing.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We've spoken a number of times on recent episodes about programs of this sort, both from distributors and from manufacturers. And D&H is sort of the latest big name in the industry out there to participate in this trend. Like, you know, we've spoken about HPE and HP. We spoke about Ingram Micro before. A lot of these companies are extending terms, they're increasing credit capacity, they're rolling out programs that allow people to defer payments and so on. And the goal for all these programs is always the same, which is just really helping not just channel pros, but the SMBs those channel pros serve, conserve cash, because we're heading into certainly a recession. We don't know how long it's going to last. Cash is king. People are uncertain about their economic prospects, so they're leery about buying technology that they might need and might otherwise invest in right now. Can I really afford to do that? So there are a lot of things that distributors and manufacturers are doing, and software companies as well, to help their clients continue to invest in technology that they need. In the case of D&H, what they did this past week, sort of programmatically across the board, is they introduced a program in collaboration with DLL, which is a financing partner that I think a lot of folks in our audience are familiar with. And essentially, DLL financing was available through D&H before, but they were offering 30-day terms. Now they're offering 60-day terms. In partnership with Lenovo, if you source a Lenovo deal through D&H, if you were getting 60-day terms before, you're going to be getting 90-day terms now. So, you know, extending credit terms, allowing people to stretch cash a little bit further. What's interesting about D&H, though, and I think this has come up on an earlier episode of the podcast as well, is really at the end of the day, so this is a programmatic offering that they introduced in the past week, but at the end of the day, they really kind of prefer to work individually with their partners, because every partner has, you know, they're in a different situation, the health of their business is different, they serve different verticals, and they really feel like one of their value adds as a distributor is they have the resources to kind of speak individually with partners, figure out the unique needs, and work out some kind of unique and appropriate arrangement. And so one of the things D&H emphasized when they issued this press release this week announcing all of this is that, you know, you look over the last year roughly, and they've already put $180 million of incremental credit out to their channel in different waves at different times. And that includes $50 million just in the month of March. And that's $50 million worth of credit that they added to the channel during March. on mostly, I assume, that kind of individualized basis where this partner here is kind of running up against his credit limit, and he's a partner in good standing. We're going to give him X dollars. We'll give Y to this other person over here who's having difficulty, and we'll come up with some different kind of opportunity or offering for a third partner who's in an okay cash position but has a customer with an unusual need, whatever it is. So D&H is really interesting in that way, and that they really kind of prefer to one-off these sorts of offerings as opposed to have something that's really just a program for everybody.
Interesting. So, Scott, as a provider, how important are these kind of changes to programs during times like this? How important are they to MSPs like you?
It could play a big part. As Rich said, cash is king. So right now, trying to get that stimulus and trying to get people to buy in. Now, with our clients, we had a run of laptop requests at the beginning of this. But as we get a little deeper into this, people may not be as open as to spending those kind of dollars on projects that maybe they had on the books to go forward. So to me, being able to have more leeway allows me to also give a little bit more leeway to my clients. It lowers that hurdle for them to say yes to those projects and those purchases.
Yeah. Which is harder than ever to do right now, getting people in a position where they can say yes if they want to. I want to just call attention to one more interesting thing from this D&H story I posted earlier in the week, because it dovetails with a conversation that or multiple conversations we've had in recent weeks about consolidation in the managed services world, and how recurring revenue right now is more important than ever for channel pros. At the tail end of the interview that I did with Peter DeMarco, who's the head of VAR sales at D&H, I just asked him, you're on the phone with partners all day, every day. What are you hearing? How are partners doing? And he said two things that absolutely aligned perfectly with everything that we've heard from people like Jim Lippy of Kaseya, who's been on the show, or Philip Vorobicek, the private equity investor we had on the last episode there. He said two things that both those folks have said, and one is the partners who have made the transition from transactional hardware and software sales, project work, to recurring revenue are the ones who are doing best right now. And in fact, by and large, are doing reasonably well. It's not even just doing best, but they're actually in pretty good shape. The ones who are more dependent on hardware transactions, one-time software deals, project work, some of them are having a somewhat harder time. The other thing he said that also dovetails with this other input we've gotten is that the partners with bigger, more diversified customer bases tend to be doing better right now, because this customer or that customer might be in trouble right now, or this vertical or that vertical might be having a particular problem. If you serve the hotel industry right now, that's your customers are really in a bad spot right now. But if you've got a relatively large, relatively diverse customer base, you probably have some customers who are doing significantly better than others, and that's going to kind of help you out. And so that's another argument in favor of this consolidation trend we've been talking about, where through mergers and acquisitions or getting bought up by private equity, you're seeing the rise of these bigger MSPs. There are dynamics in the marketplace right now that really sort of promote and emphasize the business logic of that trend, and might help accelerate it.
Well, if I can circle back around on something you just said, Rich, because I'm hearing it in the channel with peers, guys that had service desks that were open to the public, that they were looking for that transactional sales. And there used to be a saying when you were marketing in the MSP world, there's riches and niches. Well, unless you happen to pick the wrong one, like dentistry, where dentists in many states are now closed. I mean, they're just mandated that you're done. That's problematic for a few people I've talked to. So I won't say that I would advocate this shit should be wide and deep, I am, and it's worked well for my team. It all depends on your market, but I 100% agree, Rich, and that's just what I want to say. I'm hearing the exact same thing from many, many people in many different areas across North America. Those that had a majority of their monthly revenue came from transactional sales, they're hurting, and those that had been in one single niche that now is dried up, they're having to make some changes real quick.
Yeah, Rich, I want to ask about that because we've talked to a lot of people here on the show in particular that I have been saying in the past, specialize, focus on one area, pick dentistry or pick veterinarians or pick lawyers or whatever and get as deep with that as you can. Do you think coming on the other side of this, there might be a shift in that thinking? Like, you want to be specialized, but you don't want to hyper specialize.
It's a great question, and it's been on my mind a lot. I don't have the definitive answer yet. I haven't sort of thought my way all the way through it, but it's very much on my mind because I feel a little guilty. I'll tell you the truth. We have been, and it's not just us, it's like every vendor out there and so on, but we've really been pushing this idea that specialization is more profitable. Pick a vertical or a technology category, but quite often this conversation is about, choose a vertical or two that you're already probably specializing in because, through referrals, you've built a business that's 60% dentists or whatever. Specialize in that vertical, the knowledge that you have in that field, and your ability to speak the lingo, your knowledge of the systems these people use, that's going to differentiate you from competitors. It's going to make you more sticky. It's going to produce higher margins and so on. And, especially now as we're talking about this consolidation trend and the rise of larger MSPs, if you're not planning to get big yourself, one strategy for getting through this consolidation trend is to specialize. If you are the person who has a niche capability that these bigger guys can't match, that can help you continue to compete with these companies as well. But at the same time, if you do decide, I've got a lot of clients in the restaurant business and I'm just going to go deep on restaurants, and then something happens that shuts down all the restaurants, there is definitely a vulnerability there. And so this has become a much trickier conversation, I would say, than it used to be.
Well,
Scott,
Rich,
your reaction.
if I could just tag in on that. Yes, we've heard across the channel from many different vendors that we should always be doing that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong at this point. Time's going to tell the tale. But in my mind, as a business owner in the MSP space, I always thought, well, hey, I'm in a smaller market, so there's not as many dentists or restaurants that you can really scale your business around. So it kind of forced me to be a little wider. But the analogy in my head was that's kind of like going into the stock market and buying one stock. And what happens if that stock crashes? To me, it was always a gamble. And I'm going to have some mentors. I just ticked off a whole bunch of peers. I know I did. But that was something that's always been in my mind is, okay, what happens if? Well, unfortunately, what happens if just happened. And it's going to change the landscape. I think you're bang on with that, Rich. It's definitely going to change the landscape. What's that going to look like? Who knows at this point, but it's going to change.
It's going to be a very interesting conversation to have over the next, month to next quarter, really probably throughout 2020. We're going to be coming back to that particular topic quite a bit as things roll on here in the Twilight Zone episode that we are currently living in. Rich, we're going to move on to the next story. So Tech Data is going to send a large burly man to your office to yell at you and make you run laps. Is that what I'm getting here?
That's close. That's close, Matt. That's pretty good. But and the good news is this is all online. So actually, the big, loud, burly guy will not be visiting the office. You'll just be on Zoom with the big. Although most of the coaches involved in the story, I suspect, will not be big or burly. What we're talking about is a new program that officially debuted from Tech Data this week that they are calling Tech Data Coaches. And I love this idea, actually. So the inspiration for it was, Tech Data, like lots of vendors and distributors, does all sorts of in-person events. They collect feedback from the attendees at those events. And consistently, what folks who go to these conferences say is one of the most valuable reasons to go is the peer-to-peer interaction, but also the interaction with tech data experts, the ability to speak to somebody who knows some technology really well, or who knows some functional discipline like sales really well, and just kind of get some wisdom from them that I can apply in my business. And so the thought was, it's great that that is an opportunity for people to have at events, but why don't we make that available to all of our partners all year long? And so for the last 6 months or so, they've been working behind the scenes on this program that they call Tech Data Coaches. What they've done essentially is gone across the company. Right now, they have found a little over 70 people who are experts in one subject or another. And that could be cloud computing, it could be security, Internet of Things, it could be sales, marketing, finance, and they actually kind of get into specific subcategories, inside marketing. If you want to talk to somebody who does digital marketing, for example, they've got somebody like that. So they've got 70 plus coaches that they've assembled right now. All these people have been sort of screened and validated, by a committee inside Tech Data to make sure that they really do have relevant insights to offer. They've gotten training that, to kind of help them be good coaches. But if you want to get some free advice, basically, from a subject matter expert within Tech Data, you can go to a website, set up a profile, tell Tech Data what you do, what your interests are, what your needs are, and this platform will connect you with, will recommend some people you might want to speak to, and you can then go ahead and book time with them to ask some questions and get some insights.
So, Rich, you know what they say about free advice and what it's worth?
I could guess.
So no, I'm kind of kidding there. So this seems like a good idea. What it says a wide range of business and technology topics. I mean, who are these people, and why is their advice good?
Well, so if you are, so I mentioned digital marketing before. Well, they have people who are doing that for a living at Tech Data, and there are plenty of Tech Data partners who are kind of trying to figure it out on their own. So there's, connect me with a digital marketing person at Tech Data who can teach me the right ways and wrong ways maybe to go about that. They have all sorts of security subject matter experts over there. I've got questions about that. I would love to spend 30 minutes, in a Teams call or whatever with somebody and just kind of pick their brain about this issue I'm running into. So it's that kind of thing. It's people who have technology expertise that they normally, deliver through professional services or pre-sales calls and so on and so forth, serving as coaches part-time as well. People who work in particular vertical industries, people who work in functions like finance, sales, et cetera, who do this for a living, know a lot about it, and are willing to share what they know.
So it seems like this would be something everybody should gravitate to, right? Because everybody could learn something, and if they're really offering this, it seems like a good thing to me. Scott, what do you think?
Well, it harkens back to what I've been hearing from like the sharks from Shark Tank or any of these motivational gurus is if you got some extra time, you better go learn some extra skills so that you're not just idling around. So the fact that you've now got some resources that aren't going to cost you any money, that they have a track record behind them, that's not a bad idea.
Now, Rich, is this a temporary thing, or is this something that they plan on offering just ongoing forever?
This is just ongoing, and I mentioned 70 plus coaches right now. They continue to add more. The expectation is they could have hundreds of them over time. But there's no expiration date, no end date on this program. It's just something that they're going to be offering their partners. And to your point, Matt, you were kidding, of course, but it is possible that you connect with a Tech Data coach and find that the advice you get isn't good or whatever. But I would just say if you are a Tech Data reseller, given that it's not going to cost you anything and it could provide some business building advice, business growth advice, it does sound like something you would want to at least check out.
Right. Even if it could inspire you to think about something different, that seems like it'd be
Yeah.
a good thing. And you're saying these coaches cannot make you do push-ups.
I didn't ask that actually. That's a good point. Yeah.
It's the chin-ups that I was worried about, Matt.
Yeah.
It's the chin-ups. Push-ups I'm okay with.
Because they can help you with your business because we're all working at home and moving a little less. We got to work on our midsections a little bit too. Maybe they could help with that. Scott's over there doing some flexing there. Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot else to say about this, but it seems like if you are a tech data reseller, you should absolutely check this out and run some of your things that you're doing past these coaches and ask for some advice and learn about some other areas where you might be a little weak on.
Where I could see this really helping out, Rich, is you brought it up earlier in the broadcast. Some of the smaller guys that are in the channel that are tech data partners that maybe don't have resources to go ask. Wow, you've now got free resources of a large company. And as you said, you're going to get some advice. So I can see this really helping out those small and medium-sized organizations that don't have internal or peers that they can call on. Now at least they got a spot they can start with. It's better than a Google search.
Absolutely, right? Imagine if you're a newer MSP or reseller and you're just trying to figure everything out. This would be, I think, just an amazing resource available to that. Free advice from people who know more than you.
So just a few final notes there. So from a longer term perspective, Tech Data says they want to get vendors and partners, resellers involved in this program. So right now, all the coaches are Tech Data employees. Down the road, they might be able to connect you with a coach from, HP or Lenovo, say, if that's going to be the most relevant source of information. And they also want this platform to be a place for peer-to-peer coaching. So if you're an experienced MSP, you might volunteer to talk to newcomers to managed services, which is an interesting thing. And then the other thing for anyone who does business with Tech Data listening to this right now is just wondering, where do I find this? Call your rep, and any inside contact you have at the company should be able to connect you with this platform. And supposedly you can also find it on the shop site, shop.techdata.com, on their Stream One Cloud marketplace. They've tried to make it easily discoverable in all the sort of usual online places too.
So if you're talking to a peer, wouldn't they technically be your teammate and not your coach?
I see. Oh, I see what you said. I see what you did there.
A little slow to that one today, Rich.
Yeah.
That Matt guy, he's sneaky over there.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, folks. If you're following along here in the audio version or watching on YouTube, we're always just kind of touching the surface of these articles and stories that we're talking about. There's always a lot more information in the text. So go to the show page if you're listening for episode 142, and then you can find links to all of these, and you can follow along and get all the extra details as we kind of talk about them. And if you're watching on YouTube, open that description area, and you'll find all the links there as well. And of course, feel free to comment, post questions, and we'll see those and we'll check them out. Also, if you have any other questions as we go through, email us. podcast@channelpronetwork.com is the email address, so that way we can get those in and answer those on a future episode. Rich, we're going to move on to the next episode. So Zix is not introducing coaches. They are introducing integrated cloud productivity, security, and compliance. It sounds exciting, Rich. Tell us about that.
This is interesting stuff, actually. Yeah, so Zix is a company that's been in the email security and archiving business for a while. They first grabbed a bigger piece of mind share in the channel January 2019 when they purchased AppRiver. So AppRiver is a cloud distributor, probably a more familiar name to folks in our audience than Zix is. Zix went out and bought AppRiver for $275 million January 2019, and they said that the reason they were doing it is they had a vision, basically, for how these two companies could kind of come together to create an offering that would blend AppRiver's expertise in Office 365 and other software as a service applications, their support and services capability, their advanced threat protection service, which they developed in-house, with the email security and archiving tools from Zix, and create this big sort of comprehensive platform. So here we are about 13 months and $20 million worth of investment later, and Zix has kind of brought that vision to life in the biggest way yet. So they've introduced something that they're calling Secure Cloud. It builds upon an Office 365 distribution platform that AppRiver introduced, I believe, in 2017, which has been quite popular apparently with AppRiver partners. So they took that platform, they completely redid the interface, sort of modernized the interface, and then fused its capabilities with Zix security offerings in security and archiving. They added some other security capabilities to it. And what Zix is saying basically is what you've got now is a complete secure mobile workspace offering that you as an MSP can bring to your customers. You can bring them not just Office 365, but the surrounding security tools that they're going to need as well to operate 365 in a secure way. So it's interesting from my perspective because we've been kind of waiting to watch this vision come together, and now we're really kind of seeing what it looks like. It's also interesting just because we hear from many in the industry, and we talked about D&H before, that they happen to kind of come to mind right now because they've been talking to their partners for a long time. You really don't just want to be selling Office 365 seats to your customers. That's a commoditized, low-margin business. What you want to be doing is bundling those seats together with security, with BDR, with your own support services, and create something that has a blended margin that's going to be significantly better than what you can get just on the Office 365 alone. And so here's an example of a packaged solution from a single vendor here that really is based on that analysis of how you make money in the cloud. The strategy at Zix basically is to mix Microsoft 365 and security and sell that at a markup that's going to enable you to make some decent margins on the cloud versus just moving the Microsoft licenses.
Well,
Yeah,
I
go ahead, Scott.
Their products, but the idea for most MSPs, you're trying to give your clients one neck to choke if something goes wrong. So I kind of like that concept of bundling, and the concept of bundling itself is where the profit is. Just slinging a license at that small margin makes it difficult if that's going to be your business model. So building the fact that they've thought ahead and went, hey, we're going to build a solution or a bundle. Again, I haven't seen what they've got, but that's intriguing.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of bundles like this, Rich. I mean, Zix isn't the only one with an Office 365 productivity and kind of security offering. Am I correct on that?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is, I guess, a trend in the direction of these kinds of bundled offerings.
So Scott, what I want to ask you is not to necessarily focus so much on this, but if you're folks who are listening or watching, if you're interested in finding a security platform like this to add to your Office 365 bundle, absolutely go and check this out. The link's in the news story. But I want to hit you, Scott, with Rich, with what Rich kind of said, and for MSPs who may not be thinking this way in terms of bundling, that it's important not to just sell Office 365 seats, but it is the stepping stone into offering more. How would you help those who maybe see the value proposition here and the profit potential?
So for us, we've done Office 365 for a long time, and we always used a third-party encryption, spam protection, different archiving, different things that we could bring to the table that kind of sat outside of Office 365. Microsoft has improved some of their own internal offerings that I guess you can do, and I've got a couple of friends that have gone that route. But for us, we've always said, hey, this is going to maybe sound contrite, and I apologize in advance if it does, folks, but do you want to call Microsoft Support Center to try to figure this stuff out, or would you rather call us and have us be that liaison for you to try to, if something goes wrong or there's problems, or to get this set up and make this all work? Would you rather have us in your corner that's located in the same city or area, or do you want to call Microsoft and sit in queue for a couple of hours? overwhelmingly, it's been, hey, we'd rather talk to you. I mean, you're already doing A, B, and C for us. Why would we have you do this as well? And that's kind of the angle that we've always taken with it, and it's worked for us.
So outside of what Zix offers here in their solution, what else should MSPs be looking to bundle in with Office 365 seats?
You asking me?
Yes.
Well, email is becoming so important. I mean, off the top of my head, Teams training, we're seeing a big trend moving towards Teams. I just touched on email encryption is becoming big as people are not being in the office and having to send documents securely. Archiving, backing up of Office 365. I was on stage with Kevin Mitnick 2 years ago when he demoed how they could the bad guys could ransomware a mailbox. Up until that point, ransomware was thought of on a computer or on a server level, but then, wow, the bad guys could actually take my mailbox. So, okay, now we got to start figuring out backup around that, and how do we make sure that people aren't caught? So from a security point of view, those are kind of the things I've been focused on. I'm not sure, Matt, if that answers your question fully, but those have been my concerns around it.
Excellent. Very good. All right, Rich, anything else you want to say about Zix before we move on to e-cycling?
Let's e-cycle.
All right, Rich. Now, is this like an exercise bike? We've talked a lot about coaching and doing push-ups. Is this also something to help us get back into shape?
No, it's not necessarily going to help you, although it will help you feel better, I think. It's going to help the environment, and it's going to help your community, though. Those are good things. And it's really a very simple idea. We have a story that our colleague Colleen Fry wrote about this. But for all I know, that most MSPs are doing this already, but if they're not, they really should be thinking about it. You've got customers who are retiring hardware all the time. They upgrade the PCs, they get rid of, they get new monitors, they get rid of a server, and so on. Sometimes customers will attempt to sell that hardware, which is probably more trouble than it's worth. A lot of times it just gets disposed of, and you cleanse the data out of there and just kind of dump the hardware somewhere. There's a United Nations report cited in the article here that we're on track to have 100 million tons of e-waste globally by the year 2050 if trends continue at the present pace. Why not take some of that hardware, take it off the hands of your customers who don't need it anymore, and donate it to local schools, local churches, organizations that could really use it, that don't need latest generation equipment, and are just, desperate in some cases for computer hardware. It's a great thing for the community. It's a great thing, again, for the environment, because you're not contributing to that 100 million ton pile of e-waste. And actually, it pays off for your customers, too, because, if they're donating this stuff to you for use with charities, they get a tax write-off there. So it's a pretty straightforward kind of thing anyone could do that has a lot of rewards for a lot of people. And we just thought we would call attention to it in the most recent issue of our magazine.
So, Scott, I love the idea of keeping, perfectly good hardware out into the world in use, and there are certainly a lot of organizations here that do that. Do you do anything like this at your business? Do you help your customers find homes for equipment, or how do you deal with retired stuff?
Well, it actually warmed my heart a little bit, Rich, that you started talking about this, because I did hear e-cycling. I was thinking, what, a virtual bike? How's this going to help me out? But then when you got into the story, it's like, hey, we've been doing that for years. As we've had firms and stuff getting rid of stuff, we've donated our time to make sure things are formatted, low level. You don't want your client's data going anywhere. Reinstalling the software stuff and then donating it, passing it on to local nonprofits. And as I said, we've been doing that, a long time. I didn't know there was a term for it. So I'm an e-cycler, Rich.
We learned something today. Yeah, that's fantastic. Scott, as someone who works with IT a lot, computers can have a pretty long service life, and a lot of businesses will retire things after maybe say 2 or 3 years. but those are perfectly capable machines in most cases, and a lot of times need very little effort to be repurposed. What would you say to that? Like, how long is a reasonable life, and do you kind of cherry pick certain devices that maybe come back from a client for certain purposes? How do you work all that out?
So we definitely are cherry picking. So the example that I'll give is when people were retiring their Windows XP machines, we were not taking Windows XP and reformatting and putting them back on a system and handing them out because they're no longer supported by Microsoft. We're not going to pass along stuff that's not viable in any sort of environment. I mean, there's some caveats around that. Yes, to this day, some people may not know it, but there are still some Windows XP machines out there. Some of them in your banking ATMs, but you're not supposed to know it. But
the thought of how much Windows XP embedded is still out there is a pretty scary thought.
But going back to the nonprofits, depending on what the role is. So, like we had some nonprofits that were using them for their clients, like so food banks. So they would be having people come in and maybe they're looking for jobs, whatever the case may have been. These were not production environment. There was no risk to the organization. So that system being 5 years old, really, what's the downside? If that thing crashes, is the nonprofit at any risk? No. If the answer is no, then great. And we've had some nonprofits that budgetary wise, they just couldn't afford to go buy new systems. And the fact that they were getting a 3-year-old system was super exciting to them because it replaced a 10-year-old piece of crap that they were using then. So to them, coming, even though it was maybe 3 or 4 years old, they saw that as wonderful. So I guess it all depends on their level of risk and what it's going to be used for. I mean, typically a computer, we're told is supposed to be 3 to 5 year lifespan usable in the workplace, because we know after 3 years it gets harder to get like the motherboards or the processors, things have been retired. But if they're not in mission critical situations, or if your current mission critical stuff is on ancient dinosaurs, why wouldn't you reuse that stuff? I'm having a hard time seeing a downside to that. And for me and my team, or my team and I guess would be the proper way to say that, it kind of gives us a warm feeling to be able to give back. I mean, over the years when I've dropped some of this stuff off, the thanks and the looks of gratitude, well worth the time and energy it took us to do a format and a reload. And for my clients, when the phones started first coming out with the videos, I'm dating myself now, Rich, really bad. But we kind of would take a video of, donating it and seeing the excitement. And sometimes some of the organizations dealt with kids, sometimes with underprivileged, whatever that case is, and take that back to the client and say, hey, look, man, you donated the stuff and look, here's the impact. Well, not only did we get something out of that as an emotional charge, the client did too. So again, maybe there's people out there that are more like a Grinch, but I see that as a win-win-win. And if it's not mission critical and the client accepts the risks, then why wouldn't you?
And in terms of that 3-year-old hardware, I haven't tried this out myself. I really want to kind of carve out the time to do it, but I've just been reading lately about how you can take a 3-year-old, 5-year-old laptop, clean off Windows and install Chrome OS and turn it into a perfectly good Chromebook. And in schools, they use tons of Chromebooks right now. So, I mean, you can actually turn that 3 to 4 to 5-year-old machine into something that is, not second best technology. That's perfectly adequate technology.
There's a lot of real lightweight Linux distros too that I would use. And Scott kind of touched on it too. It's like, well, what do you do when you get something back that, say, has Windows 7 in it? Although there's ways you can get a 10, upgrade that to a 10 license, but you don't want to obviously pay licensing costs. Don't spill the beans, Matt. It's got somebody like, no.
No, it's just there's been so much debate around that. Is it? Are you allowed to? Are you not allowed to? Microsoft's given some mixed signals. So
yeah, but so you don't want to
obviously again about that.
You don't want to pay any money to update licensing for any of this kind of stuff. So there's lots of alternative things. My question though, Rich, is how much should MSPs have this as part of their process? You know, how formalized is it? Do they have a list of charitable organizations that they're allowed to make requests, like, oh, I need a computer or I need a monitor for this application, and can they wait for it? And then do you have people on your team kind of monitor that, or is this just kind of like, oh, I got a client we're doing a big refresh on, I'm gonna end up with a bunch of machines, let me format them, and then I'll, like, how do you find places to put them then at that point? Like, how does that work? Scott, do you have a process for that?
We've been more number two of what you just described. As things come up, we start reaching out to the community to see if there's a spot where they can find new homes. I really liked your option number one, though. That was actually, I was sitting here going, hey, that actually might not be a bad idea.
Oh, so like to build like a list, like let charitable organizations put requests in?
I just saw a web page on my website where requests could come in and we could maybe take those. So, Matt, you had no idea the impact you're going to have today.
Well, you know, I get, as Rich knows, I get one good idea a year. So I am very glad that I was able to pass that on to you. That's what I'm here for.
You used it up in April?
Well, and see, now I got to go through the rest of 2020, but that's okay.
But it was international, though, so that makes it like doubly special.
So, and outside of the computer, because obviously, you know, computers can have a very long service life and do a lot of different things. In fact, as Rich knows, I have like a little quasi experiment going on in my very own house about that. Remember the computer in the kitchen, Rich?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm seeing how long. Well, I'll share that with everybody someday because it's kind of a little experiment I have going. But what other pieces of technology that you might work with as a reseller and as a managed service provider might you see that could also be repurposed other than the compute unit?
So amongst my client base, I mean, there'd be some desktop printers. The challenge there is sometimes if they're being replaced, it's usually because they've broken as opposed to being phased out. Because let's face it, monitors, printers, most businesses will run those into the ground. Mm-hmm. The productivity stems from computing devices, but even some phones, that they're not going to be turning in for the reward or part of the upgrade. There could be some phones that could easily be moved on to charities. But yeah, I would see printers and monitors being a bit tougher because, as I said, those tend to be run into the ground. But if they became available, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why not, right? So I think the moral of the story is that you can do your customers a little tax justice, give them some charitable contributions on their taxes, which I'm sure they'd appreciate, and also do a lot of good in your neighborhood if you kind of plant that seed ahead of time of what to do with old hardware. So cool stuff. Anything else, Rich, you want to say on that story?
No. Just if you're not doing it now, please do it. Scott?
Well, the only other thing I want to add to that is whenever we've been doing a major network upgrade, that's actually been part of the sales process when I'm talking to my clients is, hey, look, once we put this stuff here, this is the benefits, this is why we're going to do it. Hey, we could take that other stuff. And so it's always been part of the sales process for me. Oh, sorry, process. I was being very Canadian there. Sorry about that. But it's always been part of our process to have that conversation in advance. So people are already thinking, because the question is going to come up, what am I going to do with this old stuff? Why not address it head on and say, hey, we know that charity XYZ is in need of some stuff. We'd be willing to donate our time and energy. Would you be interested in maybe donating the old gear? Or what are you planning to do with the old gear? And at least ask the questions. And that's where it's always stemmed out from for us.
Yeah, and you said the word networking, and I mean networking gear can also have a need to be upgraded, but also have a very, very long usable service life. It might be a nice upgrade for a church or for some other charitable organization who might be running an old switch. And hey, this is a great gigabit switch, but it didn't have the PoE feature that the company needed now. So that'd be an awesome thing to repurpose. So anyway, all right, well, we're going to move on. We are going to take a break. And when we come back, we have a great interview that we recorded on Monday. So when you see, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see some wardrobe changes here. But that's because we recorded it a little earlier in the week based on his availability. But we're going to speak with Dan Schiappa. He's the Chief Product Officer of Sophos. And we've got a lot of awesome things to talk about. It's a great interview, so stick around for that. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. Hey, we got a lot of security-related things to talk about today, because as we know, even though the coronavirus has set in and everyone's working from home, the nefarious have not taken any time off. So who better to talk to us about security-related issues than Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer at Sophos, Dan Schiappa is here. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're doing as well as we can in these trying, crazy Twilight Zone-ish times.
Yes, I hear you.
But it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for being on with us. For those who may not be familiar with you or with Sophos, can you tell us a little about you and Sophos?
Sure. So Sophos is a global cybersecurity company. We're very, very strong with the channel. It's the primary way we go to market with our products. We build products that span really kind of the whole spectrum of security, but we're primarily known for our Sophos Intercept X endpoint product and our Sophos XG firewall product. And then, we were really one of the early pioneers and adopters of cloud management and managing everything in the cloud. So all Sophos products are managed through our Sophos Central dashboard. And so that's kind of who we are. I'm the Chief Product Officer. I've been with Sophos for almost 7 years, long history in cybersecurity going back to 2002 when I started with Microsoft and worked with RSA as well. And now at the best cybersecurity company in the world, Sophos.
It's a lot of great products, and ones we've talked about on the show many times before. You're also in the land of heat, from what I understand.
I am. So you can tell for those of you on video that I'm clearly in work from home garb and also suffering through 97-degree heat here in Florida.
Wow, my goodness. I love that shirt, though, and that hat, like that bright kind of orange is like one of my favorite colors. So that is like the perfect ultimate outfit.
My wife is so proud that I have a shirt that matches my hat. So I did well.
So what are you and Sophos doing to kind of survive the coronavirus time that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the most important thing for us is really helping our customers survive. And what we're seeing today is obviously no nefarious hacker lets a crisis like this go unwarranted. And so they're really trying to take advantage of all the fear, anxiety, confusion around COVID-19. And we're tracking this very extensively through Sophos Labs. And we've done several things to be able to bring this information to light in real time. And for example, we have on our Sophos Labs and Sophos News site something that we call Facing Down the Myriad Threats Tied to COVID-19. And that's a live kind of blog that we update regularly with new threat intelligence. And then we also partner with other threat intelligence areas that are specifically, for the industry focusing on COVID-19. And in fact, one of our employees, Josh Sachs, who's our chief scientist who leads all of our data science efforts, he started a Slack channel to help share intelligence around any, nefarious activities around COVID-19. And we already have over 3,000 people participating in that Slack channel.
And is that something that we could share with folks who are listening or watching this podcast now as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you jump onto Slack or actually go to the Sophos website through Sophos News, we have the whole COVID-19 section, and we reference the Slack channel there, and you can request to sign up.
Fantastic, and we'll put that in the show notes as well for folks who are listening right now. So Dan, the last time that we spoke, it occurs to me, was at the RSA security conference, which feels like a lifetime ago. It was actually about a month and a half ago. So I mean, just if you think about what's happened since then, between late February and now, how, just from a sheer attack volume standpoint, what kind of a change have you seen as the coronavirus pandemic has sort of swept the planet?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing kind of everything you would expect to see, to be honest with you. You're seeing a massive surge in spam related to COVID-19, getting people to click on something out of curiosity, out of panic, out of fear. And a lot of that is including malware. And so, for example, we found some spam that had the TrickBot malware embedded into it. We're seeing, campaigns that are focused on getting you to click and download malware. We're seeing ransomware approaches where people are threatening to infect your family with COVID-19 if you don't pay them money via Bitcoin. We're seeing, people purporting to be part of the World Health Organization with dropper malware included in there, all sorts of stuff. And other things, people are panicked to buy masks and hand sanitizers. We're seeing them take advantage of that. Trying to get people, for example, we saw a sales pitch where if you pay them $37, they'll download a video that will tell you how to survive coronavirus. And this came from the military and things of that nature. So they're really trying to take advantage of opportunities, and there's risk and there's threat and there's concern, there's anxiety. Other things kind of tied to that is we're seeing a massive increase in domain certifications related to COVID-19 or Corona. Some of those are obviously legitimate, as a lot of organizations are kind of trying to bring up more information and news and valuable resources. But it's also a lot of nefarious hackers who are trying to use those terms to trick you into thinking that it's a real informative and valuable site. And so these are the types of things that we're tracking in labs and making sure, as our customers are in the industry, sharing this intel, of course, with the collective industry to prevent people from kind of falling prey to those attacks.
So it sounds like phishing continues to be sort of the primary intended entry point for these attacks. They're really focused in on spam and phishing attacks. Assuming that's the case, I mean, are you seeing any indications that people are more susceptible, more vulnerable to those kinds of attacks right now, just like, given how nervous everyone is about the current situation?
Well, I think one of the things that hackers try to do to get you to take action is prevent some form of urgency. In the past would be, hey, this is the IRS, you're going to get audited, you better click here, something that somebody would panic and click on. And we're all living in a world of panic and uncertainty and fear and information, hunger for information. And I think they absolutely take advantage of that. And so they're trying to get people to to click on something when they hear about, hydroxychloroquine. What's about, hydroxychloroquine? We'll click here and you can buy some of it, we'll sell it to you. And it's all, phony sites and things to try and take people's money, and in other cases, just to infect them with malware. And so it's a really awful thing from a societal perspective, but this is the pattern that hackers always take. They're always very opportunistic, and they try and take advantage of somebody's, thirst for information or anxiety or fear.
Do you have any advice in terms of mitigation efforts for that threat? I assume end user education is a big part of that, but anything else? What role should education play, and is there anything else over and above that?
Yeah, so I think there's several things. One is certainly this is an area where the partner community and the channel could really be helpful. They can provide a lot of this expert guidance to their customers that they're in regular contact with, help them, be on the lookout for things that are potentially malicious. But some real basic just security hygiene. Make sure you have your endpoint products up to speed with people working from home. If they're working off their home machines, make sure they have licenses to a professional grade, industrial grade endpoint product. Make sure that all of your anti-phishing capabilities are up to par. So if you're working, through VPN behind a firewall, make sure your firewall is up to date and active. If they're not working behind a VPN and they're just working straight off the internet on their endpoint, make sure that they have some ability to have web filtering and things of that nature on the endpoint, because these sites are spinning up so fast. We're seeing as many as 3,000 COVID-19 related domain registrations per day. And so, it's impossible for an individual on their own to keep up with that. So they're going to need the organizations like Sophos Labs to provide that intelligence to them, because we're just doing that as part of normal course of business. And so it's really just making sure there's good hygiene. And then on the end user side for spamming and things of that nature, just be incredibly cautious right now. If you get an email and it looks like, it's something too good to be true, don't click the email, don't do anything. go do some research on your own and find out if that's, you know, information that you should be actually looking at. But they're going to really try and get you to kind of jump to action and be excited about getting into something more quickly than you should. So just be super, super, you know, overconscious than you ever have been, and overcautious, and make sure that when you are looking at something, you're being very, you know, kind of skeptical about what it is.
Yeah, I've got to assume the issue that you folks have identified with all those domain names being registered makes that really complicated. I mean, ordinarily you can kind of inspect a domain name, and that's one of the clues that might let you know that this is not a legitimate site. But I mean, these are sites that sound legitimate, and as I understand it, a lot of them, if not all of them, have certificates. I mean, they look authentic.
Yeah, they have the certificates. If you read the names of some of the domains, they look fine. It's, you know, it's got Corona in it. It's got, you know, COVID-19 in it, coronavirusmap.net, you know, things like that you would think are legitimate. And there's even some malware that seems, you know, by the title of it, that it should be good, you know, things that, like coronavirusmap.com.exe, you know, okay, hey, I want a coronavirus map. I want to be able to track this data. And all of a sudden, you know, you're actually downloading a Trojan. And those are the things that you take advantage of. So even though it may have a certificate, does not mean it's legitimate.
As far as you can tell, are DNS filtering tools doing a decent job of protecting folks from those sites?
They are doing a decent job. And this is part of where, you know, kind of the Cyber Threat Alliance and a lot of the community behind this is really working together. This isn't a period of time to say my product's better than your product. We are, as an industry, are working together. And part of the things we've done with the Slack channel and being part of the Cyber Threat Alliance and sharing that intelligence, there's a whole section of the Cyber Threat Alliance website focused on these specific things. We as an industry are sharing all this intel together. So things like DNS filtering and web filtering and you know, malware signatures and whatever technology you can engulf is all being shared collectively amongst the community.
You know, there's been a lot of attention in the media paid to this phenomenon none of us had heard of 2 weeks ago called Zoom bombing, that, you know, there's that particular security threat on Zoom calls, and I'm sure not just Zoom calls. Are you seeing any particular threat activity specifically around the video collaboration tools people are using so heavily right now? And are there any sort of mitigation measures people should be considering?
Yeah, so I mean, I think any video conferencing that's being leveraged more and more and more is a great attack vector for hackers. And obviously they go for the lowest hanging fruit. And Zoom bombing was one of the early initiatives that they went after. But organizations like Zoom and Microsoft with Teams and Google and people like that, they're really putting a lot of effort into hardening those systems. And when you come into a world like this, where I think Zoom's usage went, you know, up hundreds of percent overnight, you know, there's going to be things like that surfaced. And I think they did a pretty nice job of trying to respond to it as quickly as they can. And, you know, this is also right for a company to make sure that they're using those products effectively and securely by making sure the right settings are in place, make sure there's, you know, passwords to join meetings, things of that nature. And when you do see people on a meeting that maybe you don't recognize, you ask who they are and what they're doing there, just some real basic things like that. But yeah, certainly the hackers are going to go and attack any technology that is being heavily leveraged, particularly in a kind of in a way that it wasn't designed to at certain scales, and look for those weaknesses.
So, you know, you've touched on this a little bit already, but in conversations with MSPs in recent weeks, you know, they're all doing their best to secure customers who are working from home due to stay-at-home orders. And, you know, a lot of these businesses were not prepared for those orders when they went into effect. People just sort of had to, you know, make do with whatever was available. So there are a lot of people working on home PCs right now. There are a lot of people using RDP connections, but, you know, not everybody is behind a VPN. So what is some of the general advice that you provide folks in terms of what they can do to secure their customers, and maybe kind of zero in on those worst case scenarios of the people who are just on the family PC and they're behind maybe a cable company firewall at best, and you've still got to connect?
Yeah, I think, obviously the fastest way to provide some level of security is to try and use the VPN capabilities within your networking equipment. We've, for example, seen almost a 10x increase in the number of downloads for our VPN client. And so that's definitely been one of the predominant areas. But we're definitely running into companies who can't do that, and they do have employees working on what was their living room computer and trying to do as much as they can over the internet. The best thing to do is make sure, with it, whatever license you have, that they are running a industrial grade endpoint product, and hopefully that you can push some policy down to make sure that you have some coverage, at least on that endpoint of, detecting malware if they happen to click on a bad link and there's a dropper or anything in there. In some cases, endpoint products like the Sophos ones, you can actually push down web security policies as well, and it can enforce web policies in the endpoint. If you are managing that through a centralized management solution, that's a pretty easy thing to do if you can push your license out to those customers at home. If not, there's certain consumer products like Sophos Home Premium, for example, or some others equivalent that will also provide pretty good security. The challenge there is that the employee is going to have to manage that, and they may not have the full understanding of how to create web policies and stuff. So, we would recommend, if you can, extend your licenses out to those work from home computers and have them install something. That would be the best route to go. Obviously, the ultimate best route to go would be to leverage a VPN of some kind.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk lately, even if you're using, say, a firewall that has, say, like, packet level inspections and things like that. There's been a big rise of what they're calling TLS-encrypted malware and encrypted packets. So what would you say to those who might be using a firewall or an older one that may not be up to snuff for today's threats?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the features, Rich mentioned, we talked a little while ago, one of the things we talked about was the new firewall that we just released, version 18 of our XG firewall. And one of the big features that we put into that was TLS decryption, because that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing bad guys using encryption, particularly TLS 1.3, to actually hide what they're doing. It's either hiding malware going down or hiding information coming out. Keep in mind, most of the time they're dropping malware down, it's either for ransomware type activities or it's to steal information. And so they use it on the outbound as well. And so we really went hard into the engineering to be able to decrypt TLS 1.3 traffic at wire speeds. Because a lot of firewalls have it, but you turn it on and the performance gets so poor, it just becomes unusable and they turn it off again. And when you're in a world, particularly if you're so widely distributed and you're doing lots of VPN tunneling into the environment, and then you can't decrypt and see that traffic, it becomes problematic. So if you are in a firewall, make sure that you have a firewall that can decrypt that type of traffic at a level of performance that you can leave it turned on. And that is very important, because they will find the fastest route in or out. And if you're not inspecting encrypted traffic, it's free. It's just free, invisible ways for them to do their nefarious activities.
You guys have kind of come up with a way in the new version of the firewall to sort of eliminate this trade-off, but there is that trade-off for most people right now between performance and security in terms of whether or not you're going to use the decryption capabilities in the firewall. I mean, do you have any advice for folks on how to think that through? Is it one of these deals where most of the time you should be sacrificing performance because otherwise you're way too exposed?
I'm a security guy, so you may be asking the wrong guy. I always opt on the security side, but I think now more than ever, I mean, you're in an environment where it's just a free for all from a hacker perspective to take advantage of these interesting times that we're in, and so I would certainly opt to the side of security right now. But it's easy to say when I don't have to worry about the cost and performance of all the traffic coming through my firewall from all these remote connections. But it's so important to really hone in and focus on the security right now, because it's been more exposed than ever. I mean, this is I think an IT trend we're not going to see end when we return back to offices. I think this work from home, highly distributed trend is going to continue. Maybe not to the extent we're in now, but start to build out some plans that, you're reacting in very short term, kind of immediate needs now, but start to think about how you can enable this type of scenario going forward and how you can scale it out. Because I don't think we're going to go back to full normalcy again. I think people are going to actually find, hey, I was pretty productive at home. I didn't have to drive my long commutes or whatever it was, or, hey, I want to hire this great employee, but they don't live near an office. It's going to expand in its usage. And, today I think you do have to opt towards being a little more secure than normal, given the circumstances we're in, and then start to, right now, while you have the opportunity, plan out how this is going to work out for you in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out too that businesses are gonna have to start thinking through the remote work at home side and have kind of a security solution already ready to implement for remote employees. And I think products like good firewalls and good endpoint security licensing and stuff is going to be all part of something that businesses should think through. Is there anything else in that kind of package that they should have?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a trend called zero trust networking, and that's a big area to look into. And that this is really kind of one of the enablers for this type of IT ecosystem, which is you can create a very kind of easy to onboard environment for remote workers. And the general concept is you just don't trust anything. So all the security is going to happen in a different way where I can't fall prey to, trusting something and having that trust violated. And so with zero trust networking, it's much easier to onboard people into those environments, provide high level security, create a lot of flexibility in how you create those remote environments. And it's something that the network companies, including Sophos, are really starting to build a lot of technology for. And when it works well, it becomes super easy to handle situations like this, much easier than a traditional VPN tunnel would be. And yet you're still getting the access, the right access controls and the right structure around what you need. So that's an area that you should start looking into, and that should be a part of your plan to enable this type of remote work experience in the longer term.
That is fantastic advice. And I couldn't agree with you more about the no trust thing. Like, I don't trust Rich at all. I mean, look at that. Like, super shifty. Look at that guy.
It's a wise policy, I'll just say.
Awesome. So, well, it's great advice. Thank you so much for going through that with us. Now, we also kind of let you know that one of the things that our audience loves that we do is a segment that we call 5 Questions. And we've kind of told you about it. And if you're game, we'd love to fire 5 questions, rapid fire, off the top of our heads. You have no idea what we're going to ask. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right. I'm going to start off with the first question. A little bit easier one. So all of us are stuck inside right now a lot and can't go anywhere, can't do, we're supposed to be in sheltering in place. Well, that means that you got to have hobbies or things to pass the time. So not work related. What are the top 3 things you're doing to pass time?
Oh, good. So I have to say, I like to drive. I like to drive cars, and I'm not able to do that in the manner I used to. So I actually got a little racing simulator for my Xbox, and I've been kind of learning how to race cars a little more effectively. And all I have to say is thank God it isn't real, because God knows how much damage I would have done to all the surroundings around me. But that's been something I've been passing time with. The other thing is, in all sincerity, is just, I have my college age kids home, and even though they're taking classes and stuff, just to sit down again and play cards or a board game with them, stuff that in normal life you might have been a little too busy to do, has been really wonderful.
And this is a question that I ask actually in interviews like this all the time, but I can't resist it, because there are some people who go to horror movies because they like to be afraid. I talk to security experts. So scare me good here. I mean, as you look down the road a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you can kind of see threats that might be coming, what's the scariest security threat that you see on the horizon?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest threat's going to be just the continuing advancements in the use of machine learning. from the hackers. I mean, obviously we use machine learning from a defensive perspective, but they're able to use it now, and they'll start to continue to advance that, where they'll learn how to evade whole entire IT ecosystems and certain products through ML, and learn to hone their phishing campaigns and all of their kind of ways to dupe us into doing things in a way that's so incredibly intelligent and adaptive and smart. That's the part that kind of keeps me up at night.
Excellent. All right. I will take question 3. You said it's 97 degrees there, so it's very, very hot. And you live in Florida, so I mean, it's hot a lot. What is your go-to heat-related beverage?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, you can't top a nice cold beer in there. I don't drink, so it's usually a non-alcoholic beer, but also just a great lemonade. You can always get a good fresh squeezed lemonade is a great quencher.
So are you like classic lemonade, or are you like one of the, I like the raspberry pomegranate lemonade?
No, just old school, lemon juice and water.
Wow. No sugar?
No sugar.
Wow. That's brave. Holy cow. All right. Rich, question 4 over to you.
So you're in Orlando. You have lived in Seattle. I live in Seattle now. I'm not trying to bias you, but do you have a preference, one city over the other, and why?
It's a great question. Like Orlando's been home on and off to me for a long time, so it's my favorite place to live. My family and I are huge Disney buff, so we're at Disney World a lot. I attended the University of Central Florida, so I do a lot with the university. So I couldn't be happier here. But I loved my time in Seattle. The month and a half to 2 months it's not raining all the time. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and the people were wonderful. It was a great place to live. I have to say I've lived in a lot of places. I've enjoyed every one of them that I've lived in for different reasons.
So I'm going to give question 5 this week to Mr. Rich. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Because I got one. So you played both football and baseball in college, right?
I did.
Do you have a preference there?
Well, I still play baseball, old man baseball. And so, it's one of those sports you can play long into your, older age. Football is not one of those sports. So when you tend to hang up the helmet and the shoulder pads, that's the end. And so I definitely miss that quite a bit. But I love baseball. I try and, still play every year. I always claim it's my last year, and yet I find myself out on the diamond the following year. So I'll keep going until I just can't.
So wait, old man baseball, is that like you walk up to the plate and you have like that walker? You're like, I'm going to hit the ball.
Not quite that old, man. But if they have it at the age that I'll need that, I'll still try. I'll try and swing a bat with a walker.
Hey, so yeah, some of those are aluminum. They're pretty sturdy. You'd be surprised. I bet they could knock that ball out there. Well, Dan, thank you so much for being on and joining us. If people want to learn a little bit more about Sophos, where can they go?
Go to sophos.com, obviously, and you'll see right on the top of our webpage a link to our COVID-specific website, so you can get there and learn, gather some of the intelligence, some best practices. Obviously, we have some strong video material on things like Vimeo and YouTube that you can go, and we're constantly updating some stuff there. But right now, I'd say at this point in time, I mean, I'd love you to come learn as much as you can about Sophos, but just be very, education oriented around what's happening from a malware perspective, from a hacker perspective, in any resource you can get.
Great. And if people wanted to reach out to you specifically, how would they do that?
You can reach out to me through LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn and drop me a message there. And if you have any questions, need advice, want to contact with Sophos in any way, learn about our products, just reach me at LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again so much for being here. Would love to have you back in the future as we talk about other security-related topics. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to finish out the rest of the show with our regular end of the show features. Usually that involves a museum pick from me, a tech pick as well, and Rich will tell us what has happened in the past. He's usually pretty good at that. He usually gets that right. And then he tries to tell us what's going to happen in the future. And he's, a little hit or miss on that one, but, he has good days and bad days. We'll just have to see what today is. So stick around. We will be right back. Welcome back to part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. We're going to kind of touch on some of our normal end of the show features. I got a museum pick and a tech pick later, but we're going to do a couple other things. So, Rich, first I want to say that was a great interview with Dan. I learned a lot. It was great having him on. Do you have any comments on that?
No, I mean, I'm really glad we were able to get him on the show. I mean, I've literally been talking to Sophos about getting Dan on the show for 2, if not 3 years at this point. And, you know, just for whatever reason, it never kind of comes together. But I've been interviewing him a lot for a long time, and he's obviously just a really interesting guy. So for me, I just feel like I'm checking this big checkbox. We finally got Dan on the podcast, and you can see why I've been wanting to do that for so long.
Yeah, and it was an awesome 5 questions segment. So I'm thinking while we're on a roll, why don't we have a little bonus for everybody and do 5 more questions? But this time it'll be with Mr. Scott Beck. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Scott, you up for it?
All right, let's give it a go.
All right, 5 questions it is. Rich and I will come up with 5 questions off the top of our head. And folks, we do not write these in advance. The rule is that we have to come up with them on the fly. Okay, so I will go ahead and take question 1. Question on the fly. You talked a lot about travel earlier in the episode when we learned about you. What is the most interesting place you've traveled to, say, in the last 2 years?
Australia.
Tell us about that trip to Australia. Where did you go in Australia?
We went to the Gold Coast, which is just south of Brisbane, and my wife's goal of that whole trip was to hold a koala. Check. We got to pet kangaroos. Check. And we got to experience, it was probably the most Canadian, non-Canadian place I've ever been.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Rich, question number 2 to you.
So speaking of Canadian things here, so for an American who has never tasted a Tim Hortons donut, what is the deal with Tim Hortons donuts? Why are they so special north of the border?
Because we don't have Krispy Kreme. Here's the truth. No, it's just become a mainstay. Like in the States, Dunkin' Donuts was big for the coffee. You've got Krispy Kreme and Tim Hortons. Tim Horton was a hockey player. Hello, Canadian. And he was famous with Toronto and the Buffalo Sabres. So he was part of the fabric, if you will, at the time. And he started out with one small little business, and it kind of started growing. And where I'm at in Moncton, New Brunswick, we actually have the highest Tim Hortons per capita in the world. I mean, you can't, you know how Starbucks is like on every second block? Yeah, Tim Hortons here. We've got 2 Starbucks and a crap load of Tim Hortons.
That's awesome. All right. Question number 3. An elephant bursts into your living room. What is the first thing you do?
Tell the dogs to leave. Don't stop trying to sniff the elephant. Get away from the elephant. The second thing would probably be call the insurance, because how the heck did he get in there? I'm assuming I've got some structural damage.
A good assumption, I would say. Rich, question 3 to you.
Well,
question 4, I should say.
Yeah, that's right. Question 4. So you mentioned hockey before. Are you a hockey fan, and who's your team?
I took my question 5. How dare you?
Oh, so yes, I like watching hockey. I have never played ice hockey. I've done road hockey as a kid. Did ball hockey, skating on a little thin piece of metal at the speeds that those guys go at. It's amazing to watch, but you're not going to see this. This form is not getting on skates and going anywhere. And who's my team? So I go Boston, Nashville, anybody but Montreal.
Oh.
Do you have a local team where you're at, or no?
No, for the NHL, our closest teams would be Boston in my area. Then we've got Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Make Believes, as we like to joke and tease Toronto fans. But we have a lot of Pittsburgh Penguin fans in this region. because Sid the Kid, of course, comes from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia.
Do you have any AHL teams in your area? Because that's, as our audience knows, that's kind of who I follow. I like the Blackhawks, but I follow a local AHL team, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Are there any of those around you?
We used to have the Montreal-Chicago farm team combined way back in the day with the Moncton Hawks. But now
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, so they were actually their farm team. The AHL was big here on the East Coast. But as salaries increased, viewership didn't, and the AHL moved on to other spots. So we have what's called AAA hockey. So that would be your 14 to 20-year-olds who would be in the farm system to step up into the AHL or NHL.
Very, very interesting. Very cool. All right. Question number 5. Rich, do you want to take it? Because you kind of stole my question 5, or do you want me to come up with something?
It's all on you.
All on me this week. All right. Question number 5, Scott. A lot of people are kind of stuck at home right now, not able to go out, not able to do a lot of the normal things that they like to do. So what would be your top recommendation of some way to entertain yourself at home that you may not have thought of?
I don't know about may not have thought of, but I've been binge watching Chicago PD. It's been an amazing show. I'm up to season 6, and there's only 7 seasons, so I got to figure out what to do after that. But there was this really strange thing that happened. There was this lady sitting on my couch that I started talking to, and it turns out she's my wife, and she's pretty decent. So we've been talking a lot now.
Very good. So binge watch Chicago PD. That says show recommendation. You know, there's other shows in that kind of that Chicago series. There's Chicago Fire, and then there's a lawyer one too that I think my wife and I started watching at one point.
Well, it's more about the ASAs because it crosses over into PD, and then there's Chicago Med, which is the hospital.
Med, yeah, we watched a little bit of that one too.
Yeah.
We kind of fell out of that series because once they started doing all the crossovers, it was like we just can't keep up with 4 series like this all the time. But we did enjoy what we saw.
So if we're talking TV and having fun, and don't forget it crossed over with the New York series too, Special Victims Unit.
Oh, I see. I don't even think we watched
Law
that
and Order. Yeah, Law and Order.
Too much TV to watch. Way too much TV. Talking to your spouse. That's a good one, though. I like that. So, all right. 5 questions with Scott Beck. Thank you so much for playing along. And hopefully we'll definitely have you back to play again down the road. For those who've been watching or listening for some time, you know that I have an interesting hobby, as I like to say. I tend to collect old technology. Mostly my wife just says I have a hoarding problem and can't throw anything away, which is kind of true. But either way, my weird problems in life is your gain, because you get to learn about all this cool old stuff that I've kind of got lying around, and lets us look back and see what things are. So this week, Rich knows I've been kind of digging through what I call the graveyard, which has all kinds of old technology that I've just kind of thrown downstairs, old desktops and all kinds of stuff. And I found kind of a fun one. So my tech pick this week is the Radio Shack TAD 1000. And I'm going to hold it up here on camera for people who are watching on YouTube. And for those who are listening, the TAD 1000 is a digital answering machine. Okay. So I want to take you back. The year is 1994. This is kind of pre-voicemail. You know, maybe if you were a big enterprise, you kind of had your own kind of voicemail solution. Or if you were a small business, you might have had something like that. But most didn't. And I remember this one particularly. And for folks who are also on this, been listening a while, know that I tend to have a lot of Radio Shack stuff because I worked there for a long time. So I kind of collected things like this. But I remember this one specifically because we had a lot of small business owners come in and buy this particular unit when it came out. It was one of the first digital answering machines that had multi-user capability. So it wasn't just one inbox. It was digital, so there's no tape. That was nice. But it had 4 different sections, and there was a voice prompt where you could kind of customize, like, oh, to leave a message for blah, click 1, you know? And I remember specifically some very small business owners be like, oh, it's great because I can have people leave, you know, a message for Sue or a message for Rob or a message for whatever, or by department. I remember a couple of people would be like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm going to have this so they can leave a message for support or they can leave a message for sales. And so a lot of smaller businesses at the time used this kind of thing. So Rich, this was 1994-ish, somewhere around there. And it was buried in a box that I uncovered a couple weeks ago. So I was happy to be like, oh, I remember that. I can show that. And did you ever have do you still have, nobody has like an answering machine at home anymore, but did you have one back in the day?
You know, the funny thing actually is the phone on my desk here does have a built-in answering system, which I have never used and never will. But there are still answering systems out there apparently. I know I didn't have that particular device, but that case, it looks kind of familiar to me. I almost wonder if I had some other branded version of a similar product.
They did make a single mailbox version of this as well at the time, and I believe this one was probably one thing that Radio Shack did, especially a lot back in the day, is AT&T and a whole bunch of other companies was going to all buy the same model from some other manufacturer, some OEM, and slap their name on it. So it's very likely that this exact thing exists with different brand names on it out there. Scott, did you have an answering machine back in the early 90s and mid 90s?
We did. It wasn't one of those fancy 4 ones, but I remember that people would call and say, hey, you kind of sound like a radio guy. It was like, I was back in 1992. So I used to have fun trying to leave some fun messages on the recordings of them.
So some fun history here from me is that, but prior to this, my family, I bought this for my family because I could at the time. We had a tape-based answering machine for many, many years, which was a gigantic pain in the butt. So this was our first foray into the digital answering system, and it was a really nice upgrade. Did you ever have a tape one, Scott?
Well, it's funny when you said tape. I never upgraded to the digital. I only had the tape one.
A lot of people did. A lot of people only had tape, the little micro cassettes. Although ours had with like a full-size cassette. It was kind of like an old one. But I remember the little micro cassette ones. I remember like you'd always leave messages like, hey, leave a message, but don't hog all my tape, So like keep it brief. Rich, did you have a tape one?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I remember about those tapes is it's not like you could go out and buy one. You would have to buy an 8-pack.
Oh, I know.
It lasted forever. And yeah, why do I need 8 of these? Yeah.
Yeah, fun stuff. Yeah, so I found this, and I've still got the box. Rich, it does not say if it has FS 400 technology in it, so we're gonna have to investigate that. But it's got.
I can see now. Matt's going to be asking us to call to leave messages on the system so we can test it for him.
I still have a house phone here that I've had like a Vonage line forever. Basically, it's just telemarketers and scammers who call it all day long. But I could totally put this on the hook it up to it and see if it still works. I'm sure it does. So fun stuff. Anyway, so that's my museum pick, is the TAD 1000 multi-user answering device from the good old Radio Shack from back in the day. So Scott, I like to do we do a museum pick where I kind of pick something old that I got here, and then I do a tech pick where I kind of usually try to relate it to something today. So if I'm talking about an old graphics card, I usually try to pick a new graphics card. It didn't seem very interesting to pick a new answering machine, although I did research them, and they still do make them. They're built into a lot of phones, and you can still to this day buy a standalone digital answering machine, believe it or not. But I didn't think that'd be a very useful pick for people. So I'm going to loosely relate it by saying if people are leaving you a message at your business, it might be someone at another business, and it might be someone using VoIP or a soft phone, and it might be somebody who's wearing a headset in order to leave that message. So I decided to make my tech pick a headset. See how it's related there? There's some logic going on there. So my tech pick this week is the Jabra Evolve 2 65. It is a wireless headset, and let me tell you this for businesses, and Scott, back me up here, because I know you probably sell a lot of technology. There can be a very, very good margin in peripherals, especially high quality peripherals. What would you say to that?
I would say just go into your local box store and take a look at cables. and as an IT provider, I know what I pay for them, and I see what they charge for them. And when you say there's a margin, yeah.
As someone who worked for Radio Shack back in the day, all those little cables and stuff, they used to call that mother because that was the stuff that paid the bills. Because that little cable from China that you would go into Radio Shack and pay $8.99 for, that cost them like 2 cents, right? So, so when you're selling peripherals and your customers, they need things like headsets or whatever, this is your chance to not just give them some $19, wired USB headset, right? That's going to break in a year. This is your chance to sell them a high quality peripheral. So I picked the Evolve 265 because one, it's wireless, and for those who are on a headset all day, there is an amazing amount of freedom in a wireless headset. So it's a great upsell to have. I'm going to see if I can put this one on the screen here for people to look at. So if you're watching on YouTube, but this is the Evolve 265. If you're listening, just go to Jabra's website, Evolve 265. Really nice dual cuff headset. It's got a lot of built-in noise canceling stuff, a 37-hour battery, a nice style, charging dock, and I've used a lot of Jabra products in the past, usually always very high quality audio and sound. So this would be a great one to deploy in a nice, a nice office where they are using a soft phone and they're all wearing headsets all day. Scott, what do you think?
I have a wireless headset. I'm not wearing them now because they have the really big earmuffs on them because it's kind of like bigger than those are small in comparison. So when I'm doing shows, I tend to use the old style. But I find they're so comfortable and good sound in them. And the ones that I got, I also use for my music because it's on my home office. So these headsets can have multiple uses depending on the environment. So, and Jabra, quick funny story, my first Bluetooth wireless before it became popular that people are wearing these, I used to have that over the year Jabra one, and people were like, oh, you're from Battlestar Galactica. Now I don't wear them. But it was beautiful. It was good tech.
Yeah, they always work really well. And I've used a wireless one now for many years. I have a different brand, but this one I've already kind of hacked the battery in to try to prolong its life because it didn't have a user replaceable battery. And this was kind of the one I was eyeing as its future replacement because the range on these, it's really important to note that the range is like you can be with these, you can be on a call, and this isn't Bluetooth. This is like an RF kind of one. So if it's important for your customer to want to be able to use it with their phone and their desktop, you might want to look at a Bluetooth one. But the ones I like are RF. I can be on a call, walk downstairs, and pour a cup of coffee while still on my headset, because it's got a great 900-foot range or something like that. So so is this like the Oprah show, and you're gonna get to say, and you get a headset, and you get a headset, and you. Oh, Scott, if we only had the budget for that, that would be great.
The taxes would kill us. It's okay. We'll pass.
So no, these are not paid product placements, but I go and I look for hey, you know what? If you're going to recommend a good headset, this would be one that I would absolutely recommend and look at. So check that out. But there's lots of other good ones. The one I use currently is a Logitech. It also works very, very well. In fact, I think we've talked about it in the past at one point. We've talked about headsets. So Plantronics also makes some really good ones. So, but here's one to pick out as a pick for this week. And as Scott is kind of backing me up here, there can be a lot of money in peripherals. So don't miss out on that opportunity to make money on hardware by just cheapening out or letting your customer go to Amazon or Best Buy and getting something cheap. When you should be controlling that part of the business as well. All right, so that's my tech pick of the week. Rich, you are notoriously good at looking at what happened in the past and telling us with 100% accuracy. It's uncanny how you do it. You're always right every time telling us what happened. But when you look in the future, it's kind of hit or miss. It's 50% maybe. So tell us what happened and what will happen in the future.
Well, the place to go to find out what happened every Friday on the ChannelProNetwork.com. We've got our In Case You Missed It post, which is written by our colleague, James Gaskin. I will simply point out here very quickly, if you are a regular In Case You Missed It reader, you read about the Jabra Evolve 2, I think last week or the week before that, as a brand new product, Matt, and we had that in Case You Missed It. So in this week, what you're going to read about is, so we were talking last week about, and on this episode about these big financing offers from major vendors. HPE kind of set the high water mark last week with a $2 billion program. Well, Cisco came out with a $2.5 billion program this week. Take that, HPE. We'll tell you a little bit about that in case you missed it. There's some new hardware from Apple that came out this week, a new post, an update on the Microsoft Partner Program from the woman who runs that, with some interesting notes in it. That'll be in there as well. And some interesting new additions to the Go line of printers from Lexmark, their SMB line of printers. We'll have all the details for you there as well. In terms of what happens next week, there's some stuff I know about, but I can't really talk about because it's sort of under, NDA right now. And you'll just have to go to channelpronetwork.com on a daily basis, and we will bring you that news as soon as it breaks.
You're keeping secrets from us. How dare you, Rich?
He told me he could tell me, but then he'd have to kill me. And I was like, all right, I'll wait. I'll go look at the site.
And we don't want any murdering going on here. So we'll just have to leave it at that. I'd like to, say thank you to our guest host this week, Scott Beck, CEO of BeckTek. Thank you so much for being on. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great.
Very cool. We will absolutely want to have you back on again in the future. So for those who want to learn more about your company or connect with you, do you have a website, social media? Tell us about that.
BeckTek.ca. I've got a YouTube channel where I do a pretty much daily Security with Scott little tidbit for folks on YouTube. Scott D. Beck, the real Scott D. Beck. And look forward to, if people got questions, hit me up.
And I hope one day one of those tips is, if you're in the channel, you should listen and or watch ChannelPro Weekly.
I may have to put that in my next one.
That would be awesome and much appreciated. For the rest of you, you should listen to ChannelPro Weekly and or watch ChannelPro Weekly. And to do that, you simply subscribe. Go to iTunes, Google Play, Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere where podcasts are found, and you should find us there. So hit that subscribe button. So that way, just whenever we do new episodes, it magically comes down and appears on your phone, tablet, device, whatever you're using, so you can listen on the train, plane, in the car, when we can all leave our houses again. Have it there on hand. If you like to watch, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. Do that. Hit that red button. Hit the bell. And we always love a good comment or two, and a nice rating is always appreciated. We are channelpronetwork.com on the internet. Point your web browser to it each and every day for news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, all kinds of great information that you need to know each and every day to take care of your business. If you'd like to email us, podcast@channelpronetwork.com is the email address. We are ChannelPro SMB on Twitter. We are ChannelPro Network on Facebook and LinkedIn. Rich, what are you on the Twitters?
@RichFree.
And I am @Matt Whitlock if you want to follow me on Twitter as well. So that is going to wrap up episode 142. A big shout out and thank you to Scott Beck. And we will see you all in episode 143. Oh, and a shout out and thank you to Dan Schiappa for the great interview. We really appreciate that. And we will see you all next week.